Have you heard of the tragic tale of Adrien Broner? Adrien Broner was once a young, talented boxer in the 2010s who looked like he was going to be the next Mayweather, but because of his ego, all of that talent was gone to waste. Today, Adrien Broner is more so known for his losses rather than his wins. Of course, you have his infamous loss against Marcos Maidana. You also have his relatively more recent loss to Manny Pacquiao and that whole debacle with the post-fight interview. And in general, Adrien Broner is more so known on the internet and by boxing fans for his lows rather than his highs.
I ain't gonna lie, I'm getting cooked.
Today, we're going to be talking about Adrien Broner, a tragic tale of ego and wasted talent. A character arc and story so tragic, I swear this comes out of a screenplay. But before we get into all of the infamous moments of Adrien Broner's career and the moments you probably know him for today, we have to talk about the beginning, when he was a promising young star. Now obviously the comparison between Adrien Broner and Floyd Mayweather sounds ridiculous today. Back in the day, the comparisons were hard to deny. He had the volume, speed, and most importantly, the accuracy similar to Pretty Boy Floyd, and he used slick defense and sometimes the Philly shell like Money Mayweather. And obviously you can't forget his flamboyance, his trash talking, his flexing of money, and his about billions persona. I would argue he was more funny and more savage than Money Mayweather. I mean, just take a look at this clip.
Regrets about anything that went on in the pre-fights and all the news conferences?
Negative. I'm good. I beat Polly. I left with his belt and his girl.
But anyways, if we go back to Adrien Broner's boxing capabilities, he had great KO performances against Martin Rodriguez, Escobedo, and DeMarco. And if you want to see highlights of these performances, I suggest taking a look at this video by HBO Boxing on the greatest hits of Adrien Broner. It's hard not to recognize the amount of talent he had when he was young and hungry. And even though this performance didn't end in a KO, he had a great performance against Paulie Malignaggi for the WBA welterweight belt and became a legitimate welterweight champion. But obviously, all of this would change on December 14th, 2013, when he would have his most infamous fight against Marcos Maidana. Before coming into this fight, he was coming off his win against Paulie Malignaggi for that welterweight belt, like I said before, and he was also undefeated. He was coming in as a huge favorite against Marcos Maidana, some having it 3-1 and some having it as high as a 5-1 favorite for Adrien Broner. And though Maidana was a big underdog, he was no pushover himself. He was a tough pressure fighter who had knocked out Victor Ortiz in a wild, vicious fight. He gave Amir Khan a really tough fight despite a loss, and he went toe-to-toe with Eric Morales. However, despite all of this, Adrien Broner was a big favorite coming into this fight, and everybody expected the young promising star to take another step and beat Marcos Maidana. But as you may know, this did not happen. In the start of the fight, in typical Maidana fashion, he would put the pressure on Broner. And even though Adrien Broner was immediately put on the back foot, he still remained calm, confident, and even cocky in the first round when he started humping Maidana. Maidana had a great game plan and kept jabbing to the body, and by the second round, this game plan worked when he all of a sudden went upstairs with a left hook, dropping Broner for the first time in his career. Obviously, this was a big moment in the fight because the cocky bully that was supposed to win over this super big underdog got dropped for the first time in his career. From then on, Maidana kept putting on the pressure and landing with overhand rights and left hooks. Broner could not handle the pressure, and all he could really do is clinch in these situations. By the time we got to the 8th round, Maidana had full control over Adrien Broner with his pressure, and Marcos Maidana would again drop Adrien Broner with a left hook. And later in this round, Adrien Broner would get headbutted by Maidana in one of their clinches, and he actually hilariously and embarrassingly takes a clear dive to get more time or maybe try to edge out a DQ. But thank God everybody basically called him on his bullshit and the fight would continue. And towards the end of the fight, Maidana would actually get back Broner with this infamous move and basically signal one of the greatest karma moments in boxing history. And to be fair, Broner actually started to land very well in the latter rounds, but by this time, it was little too late. Maidana would win via unanimous decision, while Broner would have to be carried out the ring with people throwing stuff at him, and it would make for one of the most memed pictures in boxing history. Now, following the Maidana fight, Broner would go kind of out of the spotlight, but still have 3 good fights against Carlos Molina, Emmanuel Taylor, and John Molina Jr., none of which were any finishes, but they were good performances and unanimous decisions. But then Adrien Broner would run into a young up-and-coming Shawn Porter who just kept putting the pressure on Broner and eventually beat him through unanimous decision. Following this fight, Broner would have a couple good wins until he faced Mikey Garcia, who completely dominated him from start to finish. This fight just really cemented that Adrien Broner really can't deal with high pressure and volume punching, and it just looked like he wasn't punching back. Directly after this fight, he was set to face Jesse Vargas, and by this time, his fighting career and his skills were definitely on the decline, but at this press conference, this really signaled Adrien Broner's decline in character as well. During one of the press conferences, Adrien Broner would out of nowhere start calling out the CEO of Mayweather Promotions, who was at the time the promoter of Adrien Broner, and called him a bunch of names I probably can't even say, but basically he was saying that the Mayweather Promotions was not out to represent him and they weren't out for his best interests, and basically everybody was against him. This reminded me of the one scene in Scarface in the restaurant where Tony Montana just starts going off and calling himself the bad guy. But I think this was a little more sad just because this was happening in real life, and it was really awkward to see somebody at a press conference start calling out his own team and own promotions, and I think this is something that you kind of talk about behind closed doors. But anyways, he'd go on to draw his fight with Jesse Vargas in a fight that was actually kind of a banger. Both guys were able to land a lot and land very cleanly, and I think if Broner was able to turn up his pace earlier in the fight, he could have won this. But unfortunately for Adrien Broner, this performance would kind of be overshadowed when he would fight Manny Pacquiao in his very next fight. Despite Adrien Broner only being 29 years old and Manny Pacquiao being way past his prime at 40 years old, Manny Pacquiao looked like the fresher and faster fighter going into that fight, and basically throughout the whole fight, he dominated him with volume punching, good pressure, and speed. Broner, on the other hand, kind of looked gun-shy the whole fight and never really had confidence to let his hands go. Manny Pacquiao dominated the whole fight, but more specifically in the 7th round, he was able to land a very good flurry, and in the 9th round, Manny Pacquiao lands with a left hand and rocks Adrien Broner, causing him to stumble to the ropes. By the end of the fight, Manny Pacquiao would win via a very easy unanimous decision, while Adrien Broner only landed about 8 punches per round and would be left with a very infamous post-fight interview. Besides this interview being very memed on, this kind of put the final nail in the coffin of Adrien Broner's career and truly showed the decline of character and the delusion Adrien Broner had. But despite this loss, Adrien Broner would continue to fight and fought Giovanni Santiago back in 2021 and had a solid performance in a very close fight. He'd go on to win via unanimous decision, and I don't know if this signals some type of return by Adrien Broner, but he showed flashes of that once promised talent that he showed when he was younger, and I'm very interested to see what he does next, and this may not be the end of his career. Though this isn't the end of Adrien Broner, it's kind of clear to see that all of his talent that he once had kind of went to waste, and that his inflated ego kind of ruined what Adrien Broner could have been. When he was younger, he had so much natural talent and promise. He was super athletic, quick, and accurate, and he also had the flamboyance and persona to draw in millions of people for his press conferences. He was also under the tutelage of Mayweather early in his career, and he could have been the successor. But unlike Mayweather, he never really had the drive and motivation like Floyd did, and he had other antics like rapping going on, and he wasn't 100% focused in boxing. You know, behind the glitz, the glamour, the money, and all of the flexing that Mayweather does, he has the work ethic, drive, and motivation behind all of it. He was an absolute workaholic during his Money Mayweather days, and he still kind of is in his exhibitions. Broner, on the other hand, solely relied on his talent alone, and when that didn't work, his inflated ego couldn't blame himself for his shortcomings and instead blamed everybody else around him. Even though Adrien Broner's story isn't technically over, and I'm still kind of rooting for him to turn his career around and his life around in general, he's boxing's stark example of the phrase, when talent doesn't work hard, hard work beats talent. Anyways, what do you guys think? Will Adrien Broner turn around his career and finally fulfill his potential? Who knows? But anyways, continue to please subscribe, and thank you for the support on the last couple of videos, and I will continue to hopefully upload weekly. Peace.